What happens when a trusted news host is suspected of deceit? Let's delve into the unfolding scandal surrounding Dan, the once adored host at Welsh News Network. Known for his charm and engaging presence, Dan's reputation took a sharp turn when whispers of questionable charity practices began to surface. It was the keen-eyed subscribers who first sensed that not everything was as it seemed. They raised flags about the transparency of Dan's charity initiatives, sparking a wildfire of scrutiny. How could a figure so public, involved in numerous charity drives, suddenly be questioned for the integrity of these efforts? The doubts primarily centered around the actual allocation of the funds raised. Was the money truly going to the causes advertised? Or was there a murkier truth veiled by Dan's charismatic facade? This initial suspicion has invited a closer examination of the entire team at Welsh News Network, who seemingly stood by as the events unfolded. As the curtain pulls back, the stage is set for a deep dive into deception. Dan wasn't a one-man show, so how much did his team really know? In the private chats, emails, there lies evidence that is more than likely deleted forever. Dan was the charismatic frontman, but behind him stood a team of seasoned people. Each member was skilled in their craft, tuned into the nuances of news production, which makes the professed ignorance of Dan's activities quite puzzling. Take, for instance, the financial manager. Known for her meticulous attention to detail, it stretches credulity to believe that the flow of funds, particularly those earmarked for charity, could bypass her vigilant oversight, or consider the senior producers whose job was to oversee content and ensure ethical standards. They worked closely with Dan on a daily basis, orchestrating the logistics of every broadcast. How could the alleged scams, running concurrently with legitimate news operations, go unnoticed? Moreover, the technical team responsible for the archives and recordings had access to all raw footage and financial transactions related to fundraising events. The idea that none of them saw anything amiss or questioned the integrity of the operations they were supporting seems far-fetched. In a setup where roles are interdependent, the notion of an entire team remaining oblivious raises more questions than answers. It suggests either a collective failure of responsibility or a deliberate oversight, perhaps motivated by personal gain or fear of reprisal. Could it really be that an entire team was blindfolded? Or is there more than meets the eye? When questions get tough, the tough get storytelling. In a recent sit-down with Irish Demon, Jim Finch seemed to turn the interview into a masterclass in diversion. The conversation, intended to shed light on the operations within the Welsh News Network, instead meandered through a maze of barely related anecdotes and evasive responses. Jim's strategy was clear. When pressed about the dubious charity events or what he really knew in internal operations, he deftly shifted the focus to an ostensibly humorous tale of a milkshake-esque charity. One might wonder, was this a genuine act of philanthropy or just another layer of the ongoing deception? The interviewer, Irish Demon, played into Finch's hands, lobbing questions from his super chats that barely grazed the surface, allowing Jim to weave his narrative without challenge. This raises a critical question about the role of journalism. A ZB Studio subscriber said, "Isn't it to probe, to scrutinize, not just to nod along? In the world of news, evasion might just be an art form for some, charity or charade." Peeling back the layers of Dan's fundraising, the gleam of generosity often blinds us to the murkier depths beneath. Dan, the host from the Welsh News Network, has been at the helm of numerous charity drives, each presented with the flair of benevolence. But how translucent is this veneer of altruism? The lies were there for all to see, and for them who knew Dan's full name, or where Dan said he lived. Typing into Google would have broken all Welsh News Network's lies. But didn't the plot hole try doing business with the scammer named Dan? Surely he would have had Dan's full name. Let's jump into the cesspool, the mechanics of these events. Dan has orchestrated everything from payments to scam, all under the banner of charity. The public's generosity was never in short supply, with thousands reportedly raised at each event. However, the crucial question remains: how much of this collected treasure actually made its way to the causes it was meant to bolster? Scratching the surface, some unsettling patterns begin to emerge. Discrepancies in the amounts reported and those documented as received by the charities hint at a disturbing possibility. Was the lure of easy money too tempting? It appears that not all the funds reached their noble destinations. Further complicating matters, whispers of lavish expenses billed to these charity events raise eyebrows. This raises a critical question about the integrity of the operations surrounding Dan's charity initiatives. When charity becomes a front, generosity bleeds into greed. The line between selflessness and self-service blurs, casting a long shadow over what should have been acts of pure philanthropy. With the fraud squad and taxman looming, did Dan even VAT registered for charities? Well, what's next for Dan? As the wheels of justice begin to turn, the potential legal repercussions for Dan are substantial. The Welsh fraud squad, known for their meticulous investigations, soon the details of the charity events Dan hosted on WNN will come to light. Will Dan's so-called team save him or throw him to the wolves? It's suspected that a significant discrepancy exists between the funds raised and the amount that actually reached the charities. Tax authorities are also sharpening their pencils. With allegations of undeclared income from these charity events, Dan could be facing serious tax evasion charges. Each piece of evidence they gather builds a stronger case against him, painting a picture of manipulation and greed. The implications for Dan's personal and professional life are severe. Professionally, his credibility is shattered. Personally, he could face substantial fines or even imprisonment. His network of colleagues and viewers, once a supportive community, might now feel betrayed and misled. The law may move slowly, but it grinds exceedingly fine. As we piece together the shattered image of a once trusted figure, let us reflect on the cascading revelations that unfolded. Dan, a prominent face of the Welsh News Network, found himself at the center of a scandal that questions more than just his integrity. The involvement, or alleged ignorance, of his team paints a troubling picture of collective oversight or perhaps complicity. The evasive tactics employed by Jim Finch and the softball questions that followed only deepened the skepticism. It's not just about one individual, it's about an entire team that might have turned blind eyes for personal gain. The charity events, once beacons of goodwill, now appear as clever fronts for a grift, casting long shadows over the funds supposedly raised for noble causes. This saga not only tarnishes the reputation of those directly involved, but also erodes public trust in media entities as bastions of truth and transparency. In the search for truth, sometimes the questions are as revealing as the answers.